Black Rock Gorge is in Scotland, just north of Inverness. It's at the village of Eventon where the river Glass makes its exit into the Cromarty Firth. In 1966, a group of Rover Scouts, mainly from the George Watson's College Scout Group, along with 5 Ranger guides and some Scouters, explored the Black Rock Gorge near Eventon, just north of Inverness. 50 years later, a reunion was held to look again at what we did. While we would have liked to go down into the gorge again on ropes, age and HSE rules meant it would have been foolhardy to try. A walk up and down the gorge was the objective now. We met at the car park of the Co-op in Eventon with the objective of minimising the number of cars to take to the gorge itself. We had the opportunity to take a group photograph before we set off. There had been concerns about how far David Bennett, the original leader of the 1966 expedition, would be able to walk, so we tried to get as close as possible to the gorge. This was not easy, as the area is densely wooded and covered in undergrowth. It is almost impossible to see into the gorge except at the bridges, so our start location had to be close to one of them. We were fortunate that Colin Fleming, the son of one of the original group, had carried out a reconnaissance a few weeks earlier, and he was a great help in organising the visit. He is a member of the Scout Association Canyoneering Group and is hoping to get them to explore the gorge later this year. With modern filming equipment, the shots from inside the gorge would be truly spectacular. Our starting point was to be 2/3 of the way down the gorge, as that was the easiest place for access. We drove to a logging site where timber was stored after being ready cut for lorries to take it away. The route was very bumpy, so cars with a reasonable ground clearance had been chosen to transport us. What we all noticed on the drive was how the scenery had changed. We just did not recognise where we had been in the past. There had been lots of scrub and small growth 50 years ago. Now there were large trees, and many of them had been felled with new scrub starting to grow. Once we got down to the bridge, there was congestion. With 18 of us, all trying to see down into the gorge at the same time, there was quite a scrum. We were all surprised at the change, though. The old rickety bridge had been replaced by a much sturdier and wider new one, and we could safely get many people on it. With the old one, you got worried if there were more than 4 or 5 people on it, for fear that something would give. Only once you got onto the bridge could you see into the gorge. The river Glass tumbling away 90 feet below you. We could only see 40 yards upstream and the same downstream because of the way the river winds. The sides of the gorge were covered in moss and lichen, and we wondered how mad we'd been going down into the gorge, hanging on ropes or swinging. Once we had all had a chance to look into the gorge, we had to decide where to go next. When we explored the gorge in 1966, we worked almost entirely from the north side, but there was no longer any good path there. Colin said there was a path on the south side of the gorge up to the next bridge, so we decided to follow his advice and take that route. In the 300 yards to the next bridge, we could only see partly into the gorge once. When we arrived at the second bridge, we were amazed, as it had also been totally replaced by a very sturdy construction. Again, there was a superb view down into the gorge in both directions, but only for 40 yards either way. But you could see the river very much better from this bridge. When we crossed back to the north side, we saw a plaque placed there by the 107th Field Squadron Royal Engineers, who constructed the bridge in June 1989. Again, we were faced with the problem of where to go next. Colin said he had not been able to find any good path on the north side, and while there was one on the south, it was a long way away from the gorge. We decided to see if we could make our way through the undergrowth on the north side. While we could get through it into open patches, we could not find any paths. It did not help us, as we could not see down into the gorge itself. The only way was to get close to the edge, holding onto a tree, and try to lean out. But even that was unsuccessful, as you still couldn't see down into the gorge. After some time messing around trying to get further up the gorge, we decided that we were achieving very little this way, and we decided to return to the cars and drive up to the start of the gorge. We followed a construction road built for the installation of a water pipeline, and were able to park not far away from a bridge carrying the water pipeline over the river. The pipeline and bridge had been constructed long after our exploration. This was slightly upriver from our original starting point, but was an easy way to get us there. At this point, the River Glass is quite wide, and there were good views upstream. At this point, David Bennett was adamant that he would be able to walk to our start point, so on we carried. The way to the bridge and across the bridge were easy walking, but as soon as we crossed the river, the going was rougher, uneven ground and moderate slopes, but that caused no problems, and we were all able to get to the other side and walk down to water level. There was a short walk of 300 or 400 yards over scrub-covered ground to get to where we had started our exploration 50 years ago. The only difference was that we were on the other side of the river from the one we used then. Once we all gathered at the start, there were lots of opportunities to take photographs. Even the people taking the photographs were themselves photographed. The first pitch of the exploration started here. Someone abseiled down to water level, and then walked or pendulumed down to another rope hanging further down. He then attached himself to that and pendulumed again. Where this was impractical or too slow, he would swim or float down the river. Getting him warmed up after this was always a major concern. Once everyone had spent enough time to realize how mad we'd been in 1966, and fortunate that nothing had gone wrong which would have caused us to test all our numerous safety precautions, we decided to go back and see if we could get to the end of the gorge where we exited in the original video. We retraced our steps to the bridge and crossed back to where the cars were parked. While we were waiting for everyone to get back across, we were slightly surprised to see 3 triangulation points near where we were parked. It was only when one of the engineers among us pointed out that for the pipeline and bridge they needed to have a proper survey to have accurate locations and levels for the work that we understood why they were there. We retraced our way back to our original starting point, but this time headed downstream on a wide track or road. Once again there was almost no way of seeing into the gorge apart from at one spot where it widened out briefly. This was at a sign which said it was the upper limit of the fishing stretch. We followed this road down towards the river, but it rapidly degenerated into an unpassable steep muddy path just used by the anglers. We went to the river and stopped, a long way short of where we exited so many years ago. At that point, as we were not able to see into the gorge at all, we decided we'd seen enough of the banks and undergrowth and decided it was time to end our visit and go and have a good lunch. So ended our reunion visit to the gorge. These are photographs of members of the original Black Rock Gorge exploration party who attended the reunion. David Bennett was the leader of the party. Alistair Gray. Catherine Yellowlees, née Dunlop. David Yellowlees. Derek Borthwick. Donald McDermott. Mike Masson. Peter Ord. Robert Carr. Sandy Mackay. Tony Fleming.